Hi, welcome to the video for day 17 of Neo-Pagan November. Today's prompt is cultural influences, and Neo-Pagan November is a challenge throughout the month of November, started by Brittany the Sunshine State Witch here on YouTube, and we're given a prompt for every day of the month of November and encouraged to make a video, short, or post in regards to that prompt. So for day 17, I'm a little bit late, but so for day 17's prompt, it's cultural influences. And Farah Nadila here on YouTube, a girl that I really like watching here on YouTube, she's doing the Neo-Pagan November Challenge. And for cultural influences, she was talking about her Muslim upbringing. And I thought about, like, I was kind of stumped when it came to cultural influences because I don't feel like I have a lot of culture. My grandmother came from Ireland. My grandfather on my grandmother on my mother's side came from Ireland. My grandfather on my mother's side was part Native, part Quebec. And my grandmother and grandfather on my father's side came from France. So cultural influences, like, we never really spoke French at home, even though my dad came from France. He was born in France. We never really spoke French at home. We mostly spoke English. So I don't really feel like there was much of cultural influences in regards to where my grandparents or my parents were from. But when we talk about culture, we could talk about the culture around us, and how the culture around us affects us. And here in Quebec, at one point, the Catholic Church had a lot of influence. And when I think about Catholicism, I know Christianity and Catholicism are very different religions, but some people see them as the same religion. And so I feel like Catholicism and Christianity have a big influence here where I live. And so when I talk about cultural influences, maybe my parents, like, my mom became a Christian when she was in her late 20s, and my dad became a Christian, I think, around the same time. So I was brought up in a very strict Christian home, and the Christian culture really affected me as a child growing up. I remember when I was a very young child, probably about 6 years old, my mother suggested that I star in an advertisement supporting anti-abortion. So my mother wanted me as a 6-year-old child to be in an advertisement that condoned abortion, that was against abortion. And I was supposed to talk about, you know, why abortion is wrong. And even as a teenager growing up, I still had this, like, belief that abortion was wrong. So when I was in my mid-teens, I did an oral in class talking about how abortion works. And yes, abortion can be very horrible, you know, tearing a baby apart limb from limb when it's partial birth abortion. But at the same time, if a woman decides something for herself, I believe she should have the right over her own body. So as I've grown up, like, I was very influenced to believe that abortion was wrong. And it's only recently that I have started to believe that, you know, for certain, in certain instances, abortion is okay. Like, I think people should practice safe sex and, you know, be careful about not getting pregnant when they don't want to get pregnant. Like, people should be responsible. But at the same time, if somebody is not mentally prepared to have a child, you know, will they make a good mother? Will they be able to mother their child appropriately? Or, you know, is it better if that child never existed? You know, it's a very controversial subject. But also, growing up in a strict Christian home, I wasn't allowed to listen to non-Christian music. Every time my sister, well, a lot of the times when my sister and I would buy, what do you call it? secular music. My parents would, especially my dad, would throw out our CDs that we bought. Like, we like to listen to punk music, hardcore music, especially the hardcore music, because it's a lot of screaming. My uncle, my dad, they all said it was satanic, demonic music, because, you know, you hear this person screaming words and you don't really understand necessarily what they're saying. So it sounds to them, it sounded demonic. So they were saying it was demonic music. So I was definitely discouraged and encouraged not to listen to that music, and even forced by them throwing out our CDs, when we weren't around. And, I wasn't allowed to date till I was 18. And even after I was allowed to date, Christian culture, encourages and supports abstinence. So, abstinence until marriage. So when I did become sexually active, I felt ashamed. I felt like it wasn't something that I could talk about, because I would be like punished, or, you know, if somebody found out that I was having sex and I was not married and I was a Christian, like, I would be an outcast. I would be seen as like rebellious and maybe even demonic, like for going against the Bible. And yet it's something that's natural, right? So I was ashamed. I remember my first boyfriend broke up with me because he said we weren't able to control the fact that we were having sex. So he broke up with me because he said that was wrong, and I was brokenhearted because it was my first love, and it was the first person that I had ever engaged in sexual activity with. So I felt really heartbroken, and I felt ashamed, like there was something that I had done wrong to deserve to be broken up with. Like, this was something that was bad within me, and something that I was unable to control, and that I should be able to control. And that because I couldn't control it, I was suffering the consequences of not being able to be with the person that I loved, right? And maybe he was using that as an excuse, maybe he wasn't, I don't know. But you know, sexuality is frowned upon. You know, showing your skin, like showing your midriff, or wearing a bikini, or even wearing leggings, in certain certain groups, certain Christian cultures, is seen as provocative, and you're encouraged not to make men stumble by being provocative. So if you're showing your form, if you're showing your skin, if you're showing your body, if you're being provocative, you're encouraging men to stumble. So you're doing something wrong, and you should be more conservative and, you know, hidden. So, you know, that's something in the Christian culture that I grew up in that really affected me as well. Of course, certain people in my family don't believe in psychology. So one time I brought a book to somebody in my family by, I can't remember his name. He's a motivational speaker, and Tony Robbins. Yeah. So I brought a book by Tony Robbins to a member of my family as a gift, as I think it was a birthday present or something. And I wanted to help my family member to, you know, think like Tony Robbins, to be positive, to be motivated, to be encouraged to see things, you know, as a victor, because Tony Robbins has overcome a lot of difficulties in his life, and he teaches others how to do that. So I brought this book by Tony Robbins to my family member as a gift, and they turned it down. They gave it back to me. They said, I'm not going to read this book. Like, this is, I think he even said it was like satanic or something like that, like where it was against the Bible. So like, I'm sure I could think of other ways that my Christian cultural influences, that I was brought up with, how they affected me, you know, like, but mostly I think it was within my sexual identity and within what I was allowed to explore, because even one time I was at church and I was with my partner and we were in a Sunday school class, and the teacher in the class was talking about faith, and he's like, okay, Christians believe in God, and when they believe in God, metaphorically, it's like they're putting their faith in a chair, and they're having faith that the chair will hold them up when they sit in it. That's what Christianity is like when you have faith. And I just commented, because I'm interested in philosophy and, you know, debate and like conversation. I said, well, don't all people believe in something as their chair? Like, doesn't everybody have faith in something? And so, you know, what makes that different from Christianity? I didn't say it like that, but it was something along those lines. And I remember the teacher responded to me just straight out. He said, if you don't want to be here, you can leave. So that really hurt me, because I wasn't trying to be disrespectful. I wasn't trying to be controversial. I was just trying to find answers, right? I was just trying to find the truth. And the Christian culture discourages you from finding answers. The Christian culture encourages you just to have blind faith, just to be, you know, focused on heaven. You know, in Christianity, you're encouraged to lay up your treasure in heaven, to focus on witnessing to people, to converting people to Christianity, and to thinking about heaven and how you'll get your treasures in heaven when you die, because you did what was right in God's eyes here on earth. So it's a religion about, they say they don't focus on death, but like you focus on death in Christianity because you're like, you're encouraged to believe that this earth is not your home. You're encouraged to believe that you're a traveler traveling through this world, and that your true home is in heaven, where you will be at peace, where you'll be with God, your creator, and where you'll get your treasures for everything that you did in obedience to God here on earth. And so it's like, it's so delusional, because you don't want to own too much. You feel like you can't own too much because you don't want to put your value in what you own, because you're not supposed to put any value in earthly things. You're only supposed to put value in witnessing to people and bringing them into the kingdom of God so that they can go to heaven. And, you know, I find it very depressing, to be honest, to think about like, okay, when I die, I'll go to heaven. When I die, I'll go to heaven because I feel depressed here, and, you know, I only feel better when I die, you know? So it's like death. Like, even my mom, she's like, well, I don't, you know, I don't mind dying because I'll go to heaven, you know? And it's like, well, that's great. You know, that's great for you. But for me, it was damaging, you know? And I find that in Christianity as well, like, we are taught to be ashamed. We're taught that the heart is desperately wicked above all things, who can know it? That's actually a Bible verse. The heart is desperately wicked above all things, who can know it? So it's like, you're taught that your heart will deceive you, that your heart is desperately wicked, that from birth you are fallen, that you need to be redeemed, that you need to be saved, that once you are saved, you owe it all to God, and you should be humble, and you should feel like a servant. You know, it's I mean, some people it works. Like, you know, I think Mother Teresa was a very giving and caring and compassionate individual, and I think she was Catholic, if I'm not mistaken. And, you know, she was very helpful with the poor and the sick. And I'm not saying that Christian people can't be really good people. Like, you know, we had a man in our church who helped us to pay for the house that we lived in when we were going to lose it. So he's a very rich individual in the church, and he lent some money to my parents to help them pay, to help them pay for the house. So we didn't lose our house. So, you know, I'm not saying that Christianity can't give you good morals and can't teach you to be a good person, but I also think that it teaches you a lot of things that can flaw you and hurt you and cause you shame, especially in regards to sexuality. So when I talk about cultural influences, I decided to talk about that because that's what comes to mind when I think of cultural influences. So thank you for listening to this video for day 17 of Neo-Pagan November, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye.